This is a death investigation, and the location is going to be 12733 Magnolia Lane. It's a single-family dwelling, single-story. The call will be initiated with a dispatch of an unknown trouble, suspicious circumstances, and upon arrival, you are going to see the wife of the apparent victim, who is going to say that she found her husband dead. We'll do what we've been practicing. We'll conduct a protective sweep. We will find a male subject in his bedroom. The bedroom is located in the northwest part of the house, and it does appear to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound through the mouth, exit wound to the top of the head. Clearly, the victim is going to be dead in this instance. We will secure the scene, re-interview the wife, who will explain that she found her husband dead after returning home from a trip. She had been gone for about 3 days. They had been having some problems. You're going to learn that he was forcibly retired. Had been very despondent, had not threatened specifically suicide, but had certainly, according to her, the potential for suicide. Just conduct a normal investigation and keep your options open in terms of what transpired. Listen to the statements that you're going to hear. Pay careful attention to the scene that we're going to examine, investigate. There will be some specific evidence that we're going to collect, take notes, and then write your report. So now prepare for your exercise.
Today, when I look at 130, I'm in trouble at 12733 Magnolia Lane. City RP next door. That'll be 12731.
Hi, I'm Officer Lewis, and I got a call that there was some kind of a problem here. Could you please tell me what's going on?
My husband's dead. I just found him next door. I came back from a trip, and he's dead. He's in the bedroom, and there's blood everywhere.
And you live next door?
Yes.
Is there anybody else there?
I don't think so, but when I got home, the door was unlocked.
Okay, and all you saw was your husband?
Yeah.
And you feel that he's dead?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, definitely.
Okay. Listen, we want to take a look at, I have more questions for you. My partner's going to stay here with you, and we're going to take a look inside, and I'll be right back. You stay right here with my partner.
Okay, thank you.
At this point, we're going to conduct a protective sweep. We don't know what the situation is in the house. We do know that from the reporting party that there's apparently somebody dead inside. It's her husband. We haven't confirmed that. So at this point, we're going to make an entry. We're going to conduct a protective sweep, and this is what we are seeing. The front door is open at this point. We are walking in. The living room, we're in the living room now. In the living room, the TV is on. There's nobody here. We look into the kitchen. We can see that there is food. It looks like old food, maybe even from the previous night, sitting on the table. It's cold. We've cleared the rest of the house, and we're in the bedroom looking at the decedent. He's sitting on the bed. His back is against the south wall. We're standing north of the bed looking southward. Based upon the appearances that we see now, he appears to have a gunshot wound to the head. There is a pistol, semi-auto pistol, on his right thigh. We're going to check for signs of life, verifying death. First thing that we would normally check, and that's what we'll do in this case, is we're going to check vitals. This particular individual has no respiration. He has no pulse. We want to feel his skin, and in doing so, we notice his skin is cold to the touch. We want to check for pupil dilation and pupillary reaction, so we would lift his eyelid up, and using a flashlight, we would examine his eyes, and there is, in fact, no pupillary reaction. His pupils are fixed and dilated. At this point, we are going to declare him dead. We're going to seal this room, secure it, and go back and pick up our interview with the reporting party, his wife, Shelby. We want to call for, make a request for coroners and for a crime scene investigator, and this room is now secured. I'm very sorry to inform you that your husband is in fact dead. He appears to be, has suffered a gunshot wound to his head.
Oh my God.
Could you please, I'm going to need some information. Now, what is his name?
Roland.
Okay. And you said that you had gone away somewhere. When was the last time you saw him alive?
Well, on Monday at about 12 noon, I left the house. We were having some problems and I just needed to get away. And so I went to my friend Denise's house in Santa Barbara, and I've been there since. So
okay. And that was on Monday?
Monday.
And what time
noon.
did you leave?
Noon.
And your husband was okay at that time?
Everything was fine. We were just having a little, argument type stuff going on.
So you were gone for how many days? It's now Thursday.
Yeah, well, till now. I just got home.
Okay, what time did you get home?
When I called the police, and that was at about, I think I arrived home at 11.
So you left, did you say 8 o'clock?
8 o'clock.
On Monday?
No, noon.
Noon on Monday.
On Monday. Actually, on Tuesday, I called him to see if everything was okay, and
What time did you call him?
8 o'clock on Tuesday night, and
Okay.
he said everything was fine, and he asked when I'd be home, and everything seemed like it was fine. And I got home today at 11 and called the police from my
Okay.
neighbor's house.
So you said that you were having problems. What kind of problems were you having?
Well, he was having some trouble with work and couldn't really handle the stress anymore, so they laid him off, and he really wasn't taking it well. He's also got high blood pressure, hypertension, and he's taking Coumadin and some antidepressant type drug, and I don't know what it's called, but we've had problems since then. And
Was he seeing a doctor?
he was Dr. Smith in Torrance.
Okay. And when was the last time you saw Dr. Smith?
I don't go to the doctor with him, so I don't know.
Okay, so you don't know. So you said you were having problems, and you mentioned that he's been depressed. Did you? I'm sorry. Did you say that he had been drinking
Drinking.
alcohol? Was there a drinking problem?
Not really.
Okay, but the two of you have been arguing, you said?
Yeah, arguing.
Okay, and that's why you left for Santa Barbara?
Yes.
Now, why was he depressed? You mentioned something about a job?
Yeah, he was just, he was laid off, and he's worked there for so long and put in so much time, and he was so hurt by that, and it's just been really confusing for him. So I think that caused a lot of tension.
Are you aware of the gun, there being a gun in the house?
Yes, he has a gun.
And did you get a look at, when I was there, I saw a gun in his, laying against his side. Was that,
It
did that
looked like
familiar
his
to you?
gun, but I just glanced and looked away and ran out of the room. I was so afraid. I wasn't sure if someone else was in the house or if he actually killed himself.
How far did you go into the room?
I just took a couple steps in and backed up.
Did you touch anything?
I opened the door.
All right. Now, has he had any other problems? Does he have any people who might be mad at him? Is he having any threats of any kind?
No, everybody really likes him. But I don't think that he has any enemies.
All right. Now, you mentioned this Denise.
Mm-hmm.
Do you happen to have her? Can you give us her phone number?
Sure.
And I think we'd probably like to call her. What's her last name?
My last name?
No, her last name.
Jimenez.
Jimenez. And what is your last name?
Rollover.
Okay. Now, Mrs. Rollover, you said that when you arrived at the house, you arrived around 11 o'clock. Now, was the front door locked?
No, the front door was open, and I walked in. The TV was on. There was food on the dinner table, and it looked like someone had began eating there, my husband, and that's about all I noticed. I called his name, walked through the house, and then when I got to the bedroom, the door was shut, which was odd, and I opened the door and saw my husband, and then I,
So the door was closed?
yes,
Was it locked?
no.
Does your husband have a life insurance policy?
Yes, he does.
And who's the beneficiary?
I don't know. He handles all that stuff.
Okay. Has he ever threatened suicide before?
No, no.
Would you say that he was suicidal at the time you left?
I think that he could have been, yeah, because of all this work tension.
And he was seeing Dr. Smith for that as well.
Right, depression.
Back again, I have a couple of more questions to ask you, and I was interested in your relationship with your husband. How long have you been married?
We've been married 8 years this July.
Right. Now, aside from the problems you alluded to, his depression and the arguing, how would you characterize your relationship with him?
Well, it was always pretty stable up until he was laid off, and then he started becoming depressed and wouldn't really communicate his feelings to me, and it just started falling apart. That's why I needed some time away.
So there was tension in the house.
Yes.
Do you know if he was having any other relationships outside the house?
I don't think so. I hope not.
Okay, and you earlier mentioned no enemies, no threats.
Not that I know of, but he was also being quiet, and we didn't talk much, except for the occasional fight.
We're going to have to call the coroner, and the coroner is going to arrive. We've also asked for a detective. We're going to begin processing the scene. I'm going to ask you to not go in the house. I know you're here with your neighbor. I think her name is Betty. If you wouldn't mind staying here until we finish examining the scene next door, and then the coroner, we expect he will be here in about 2 hours. If you're comfortable with that, then we're going to go ahead and leave. An officer's going to stay with you for now. But if you think of anything else you'd like to add to your statement, please let me know. We're going to be around for a couple of hours.
Okay. Thank
you.
you.
We're now looking at the decedent again. We're going to conduct our scene investigation. As stated before, and as we saw before, his back is against the south wall. On his thigh is a semi-auto pistol. We're going to leave it in place pending the arrival of the coroner's office before we seize the weapon. Clearly there is an exit wound at the top of this decedent's head. There is a spatter pattern, cone shape, showing upward velocity. Entry wound appears to be under the chin. You can't see it at this point. We'll take a look at it later, but there is a bullet fragment in the ceiling above his head. We'll talk about that later. There is a note on the table next to him, which we will look at. Also a bottle of beer, which we'll talk about. We can see some post-mortem lividity in his arms. We'll take a closer look at that, and we'll comment in just a minute. There again is the weapon. Again, we're not going to seize that weapon in pending arrival of the coroner's office, but when they do arrive, we'll take a photograph before the weapon is moved. We'll unload it. We will discover later on there is a live round in the chamber which we will seize, and the weapon will be seized as an item of evidence. In looking at the victim more closely, we can see his entry wound there. Went up through his head and out the top. He does have some blood around the mouth, just below the mouth area, and blood coming out of his ears. There's the spatter pattern. It's cone-shaped, showing upward velocity. Pieces of brain and bone intermixed with blood on the wall. Spatter pattern consists again of a piece of brain, blood, and bone. Exit wound on top of the head. There's a close-up of some post-mortem lividity. Would indicate that death was within at least 2 to 4 hours at this point when the post-mortem lividity was initiated. There's also rigor mortis present in the extremities. Another shot of post-mortem lividity. Make sure you take a photograph of the post-mortem lividity and also the spatter pattern and the position of the weapon. From this shot, you get a different angle on the exit wound and the position of the body and weapon. Notice the door to his right. That door is on it will be on the east side of the room, on the south wall. This is the ceiling area above the decedent. There is a bullet fragment embedded in the ceiling. Now you're going to need to recover that bullet fragment. And by the way, it is a .45 caliber. When we measure it, we find it 6 inches north of the south wall and approximately 15 feet east of the west wall. Again, a close-up of blood emanating from the decedent's right ear. Take a photograph after your overall photograph of the specifics. This is a note that was left on the table. We'll get a close-up of it in a minute. There's blood spatters on the note. There is a beer bottle, Coors Light, 12-ounce bottle, also on the table. We're going to dust that bottle, by the way, for fingerprints, and we will recover 3 latent fingerprints on the bottle. We'll make sure we book that as evidence. And a close-up of the note. We'll get a different angle on it in a second. The note says, "I can't take this, this is the only way." It's signed Roland, and we want to make sure that the decedent's wife examines the handwriting on this note, and we will do that, and she will have identified it as his handwriting, his signature in the bottom. We'll recover that note as an item of evidence. There's an expended shell casing. It's a .45 caliber, and its position is consistent with the position of the weapon and the ejector port of the weapon. That ejected shell casing is 4 feet 6 inches east of the west wall and 9 feet north of the south wall. You want to include that in the sketch that you'll be drawing. Different angle on the exit wound. Make sure we take a photograph of that. Again, we're still pending the arrival of the coroner's office, so we want to not disturb or reposition the body in any way. Again, different angle of the exit wound. The coroner's office has now arrived. They're going to take the decedent's liver temperature as soon as they remove him from the bed. They are doing so now. By the way, it's about 1,300 hours. The coroner's office, coroner investigator, and assistant have removed the decedent from the bed. They placed him on their gurney, and they're taking his liver temperature. It is 83 degrees Fahrenheit based on the liver temperature. The coroner's office personnel have now removed the decedent, and he's being transported to the coroner's office. We are now going to seal this room and secure it. I'm Officer Lewis, and it's my understanding that you had called the police for your neighbor Shelby.
Yes, sir, I did.
Why don't you kind of walk me through the story and tell me what happened? I'm trying to figure out what the circumstances were. When did you first become aware of a problem next door?
Well, all of a sudden, I heard pounding on my door. I went to my door.
What time was this?
This was about 11:15 in the morning.
Okay.
Shelby was yelling and screaming, a little hysterical, telling me to call the police, so I dialed 911 and gave her the phone.
Okay. And did she tell you what the problem was?
I didn't hear exactly what it was until she started talking to the police, saying that her husband was dead in their house.
And did you go over there?
No, I didn't, sir. I stayed with her until the police arrived.
Okay, I see. How long have you known the family?
About 5 years.
How well do you know them?
Just neighbors, talk to them occasionally when I see them outside, that's about it.
Have you noticed anything unusual about Roland?
Well, it was kind of unusual because I saw him, was it Wednesday when he was picking up the mail? It was middle of the afternoon, still wearing his bathrobe. I said hi to him, but he didn't answer.
This would have been yesterday?
Yes, sir.
About what time was that?
It was right around noon.
Okay. And what did he do when he picked up the mail? Did you talk to him?
I said hi, he didn't answer me or anything. I figured he didn't hear me or he was just preoccupied. He went back inside.
And did you hear any other sounds or see anything going on in the house since then?
You know, there was a sound, thought it was a backfire from a vehicle that I heard. It was about 10:30 last night.
Now, describe that sound again.
It was just a popping sound.
And where was it coming from?
I just thought it was here in the neighborhood, either on this street or the one right behind me.
Are you familiar with gunfire?
No, sir, I'm not.
Okay. So you, if I were to ask you if what you heard was a gunshot, what would your response be?
I couldn't tell you. To me, it sounded like a car backfiring.
Okay. Any problems in the neighborhood? Any suspicious activities? Anything like that?
None that I'm aware of.
When you had previously spoken with Roland, what kind of impression did he leave with you?
He seemed very easything, relaxed.
You're unaware of any threats of suicide or anything like that?
None at all.
Did he have any enemies?
None that I know of.
How's the family getting along, Roland and Shelby?
Well, I heard a little arguing here or there, but never paid much attention.
Now, were you aware that she's been out of town for several days?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, so if I were to ask you, did you see anybody else come in or go, what would your response to that be?
I hadn't seen anyone but Roland in a few days.
Okay, I see. Can you think of anything else that you can add that that might kind of illuminate the situation? Anything I've forgotten to ask you?
Not that I can think of.
Well, if you do, please give us a call, and you've got my business card.
I'll do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
You have now listened to interviews from the wife and the next door neighbor. What you have learned at this point is that the wife came home on a Thursday morning at about 11 o'clock, discovered her husband dead. We conducted our investigation. We learned that she left after having some arguments with her husband. She left for a 3-day trip. I believe she left on Monday, as the statement reflected. She called him Tuesday night, and he was still okay. You also had heard where the neighbor heard a loud sound on Wednesday night about 10 o'clock. Don't forget that we wanted to check to see if the police were notified of any occurrences about that time, and on Wednesday night at about the same time there was a report of fireworks in the area. We've examined the scene. There is a note that appears to be a suicide note. We will certainly collect that note. The weapon was positioned in such a way that it is consistent with the expended shell casing. It was a 45 caliber semi-auto. The port was located on the right-hand side of the weapon, and it was positioned in such a way that turned around, the shell was ejected to the left as you face it, and that's where we found it. It was consistent with the position of the weapon. You may recall that we showed you a bullet fragment in the ceiling. We would want to collect that. We would have collected the note, of course, and there was a beer bottle with fingerprints on it. We would have dusted that bottle for prints and collected the prints. In terms of report forms, you're going to have a choice to make. If you believe this to be a crime, and you do need specific justification for that belief, you would write a crime report face page. However, if you feel this were a suicide, then you're going to write a standard death report form. You'll need a crime scene log to document all those who entered that scene and who left it, a photo log, a property report form, and you'll have a drop wall sketch. And that should just about do it for the forms. In terms of narrative, it's the same format: preliminary information documenting the broadcast, your initial observation, that would be the first contact with the wife, your protective sweep, wherein you discovered the body, the continued interview with the wife, your death scene investigation, and remember, make sure you describe that scene in as much detail as you can, and all the evidence contained within it. You also need to know that the coroners arrived at around 1300 hours, and I would create two deputy coroners. One of the first things they would have done upon examining the body was take the liver temperature, and so they did, and the liver temperature was 83 degrees Fahrenheit. The ambient air temperature in the house was around 70 degrees. You need to calculate time of death from that, and recall that the body temperature loses 1 to 1.5 degrees per hour. So assuming a 1 degree per hour body temperature loss, you should come up with about a little over 15 and a half hours. If that's the case, then you would subtract the 15 hours from the 1 o'clock. That should take you to around 9:30 to 10 o'clock p.m., or 2130 to 2200 hours plus or minus. Assuming a 1.5 degree loss in temperature, that should take you to around 12 midnight plus or minus. So that's probably going to be your range. Later, when you do your conclusion, I want you to consider those time factors, as well as the information you received from the neighbor, the witness, and also the police dispatch records. And then the interview with the next door neighbor. And that should just about cover it.